Welcome to part 2 of my resilience guide. In part 1 I covered what the resilience stat does, how to get the resilience stat, and Titan barricade. If you haven't watched part 1, that's okay. I tried to format this guide in a way where you don't need to watch part 1, but it is highly recommended to get a basic understanding of resilience. In this part I'm going to cover overshields and the various types of damage reduction, and then later on I'm going to get into EHP. This video is the third installment of my stat guides, a series in which I intend to cover all 6 of the armor stats in Destiny 2. In the future, I'm going to be covering the other stats, so if you're interested, subscribe for that. Just like in part 1, I'd like to start things off by crediting Pippin's Destiny 2 data compendium, Charles Burgar's Damage Resistance Explained article, and Court's Damage Reduction Overview as sources for some of the information in this guide. Their links will be in the description as per usual. Here's a table of contents for the video. This time it's a lot more specific than part 1 since we're technically only covering 2 topics, however they're very big topics, so I imagine specificity could help. There are other topics covered throughout the video, but these were the main key points I wanted to highlight. So the sections are as follows. Overshields, how damage resist works, super damage resist numbers, damage resist mods, damage resist exotics, enemy damage output reduction, and EHP. Okay, so we've talked before about how big your HP bar can get using resilience, but what if we wanted, more? Well, overshields are extra HP points you can get on top of your normal HP bar. The overshield bar is shown as a blue bar that covers your normal HP, denoting that damage will be applied to the overshield before your HP bar. There are a ton of overshields which each have different properties, including differing regen rates, HP pools, and damage resistances. I'm gonna go over most, if not all, of the overshields in the game. Before I start listing the different types of overshields, I'd like to go over what is now the most common overshield in the game. The Void Overshield. Void Overshields have 45 HP, last 10 seconds, and have 25% base damage resistance in PvE. The duration can be extended to 15 seconds with Echo of Persistence. Titans can increase it even further to 20 seconds using the offensive bulwark aspect. There's also Starless Night, which is a stronger variation of a Void Overshield with 65 HP instead of 45. Void Overshield sources include the Bastion aspect. The melee Bulwark Hurl grants 15 points of Void Overshield per hit up to the max of 45. Shield Bash grants a Void Overshield on kill. Repulsor Brace upon defeating a Void debuff target. No Backup Plans gives you a Void Overshield on a shotgun kill. Edge of Action grants an overshield in its bubble, unless you have the Helm of Saint 14, in which case it gives you Starless Night, the stronger overshield. It should also be noted that the bubble that's dropped from Edge of Action has 8,500 HP. For reference, Well of Radiance has 300, and Ward of Dawn has 13,500. So it's far stronger than Well, however, it's about 2/3 the effectiveness of Bubble. While inside of Ward of Dawn, you get a 425 HP overshield that negates precision damage, however upon leaving the bubble you lose this shield. Even though you lose the shield no matter what, if you have Helm of Saint 14 on, you get the Starless Night 65 HP overshield, as opposed to no overshield. All of these sources are 45 HP Void Overshields unless stated otherwise. Okay, on to the rest of the overshields. Whisper of Rhyme gives either 12 HP or 35 HP depending on the size of the stasis shard you pick up. This stacks up to a maximum of a 100 HP overshield. It only lasts 10 seconds, but the duration is refreshed anytime you pick up another shard, whether it's big or small. Eternal Warrior gives a 75 HP overshield that negates precision damage in Fists of Havoc. Icefall Mantle grants a 100 HP overshield with 62.5% damage resistance until it's deactivated. Mark 44 Stand-asides grant up to 75 HP of overshields while you're sprinting. One-Eyed Mask gives you a 95 HP overshield for 6 seconds. Precious Scars grants a 100 HP overshield for 10 seconds. This applies to both you and allies within 15 meters. Cuirass of the Falling Star has a 100 HP overshield that lasts up for 20 seconds based on how long your Thunder Crash was. Star Eater Scales will give you a 100 HP overshield for 16 seconds upon casting your super with 8 overcharge stacks. The Aeon Set Sect of Vigor gives a 110 HP overshield to your Aeon allies for 20 seconds. You get this effect when you cast your super, and the overshield regenerates after a small delay, much like your HP. Reactive Pulse gives a 200 HP overshield and 60% damage resistance while you're in the finisher animation. Turnabout gives a 30 HP overshield after breaking a combatant's shield, or a player's shield when they're in super. The mod Bulwark finisher gives you a 115 HP overshield upon finishing an enemy. It takes a quarter of your super to use, but it actually has a hidden property to it that no other shield in the game has. Bulwark finisher's shield has a shield gate. This means damage can't penetrate the shield while it's still up. In other words, if you take 1 billion points of damage and you still have the shield up, you're a-okay. Heir Apparent will give you an 80 HP arc shield that negates precision damage when you spin it up at full health. The shield has 45% damage resistance against kinetic damage, 20% damage resist against non-arc elemental damage, and 0% damage resist against arc damage. If the shield is destroyed with arc damage, it blows up the user for 120 damage. The Catalyst grants a multiplicative 75% damage resist in PvE and 25% damage resist in PvP. That 75 and 25% is just an extra multiplier on top of the damage resist it normally gives you. Sheltering Energy will give you a 100 HP overshield upon picking up a Warmind cell. This overshield lasts for 20 seconds and regens just like your HP. Well of Radiance wait a minute, they removed that one. Warlock Rift gives you an overshield, but it's the smallest overshield in the game at 15 HP. You only get this overshield while you're standing in the healing rift. And finally, in PvE, when you're frozen, you get an overshield, but I wasn't able to get around to test this one. So that's all the overshields in the game. Now, throughout this video I've been mentioning damage resistance a lot, but what exactly is damage resistance? Damage resistance reduces the amount of damage an incoming attack does. Some even say that it allows you to resist damage. Damage resistance in Destiny 2 is multiplicative and not additive. So what exactly does that mean? Basically, if you get 2 different sources of damage resistance, let's say 10% and 25%, and you combine them together, you only get 32.5% damage resistance. A big thing to note is how I'm saying the term combining them while using an and sign instead of an addition sign. This is to emphasize that we are again not adding them together. However, if you hear multiplicative, you might also think you just multiply the numbers together, but that doesn't work either. This is because damage resist is literally calculated backwards. When you see the 10% and 25% damage resistance numbers, what you're actually seeing is a 0.9 and a 0.75 multiplier on the damage that you're taking. The 0.9 and 0.75 are the multipliers used to get your total damage resistance. To try and find out what the multiplier is for each damage resist amount, take 100%, then subtract the damage resist that you're trying to calculate. You then move the decimal place 2 spots to go from a percent to a whole number. When you multiply the 0.9 multiplier, which we got from the 10%, and the 0.75 multiplier that we got from the 25%, you get 0.675. The next thing you do is take this number and subtract it from 1. In this case, it gives us 0.325. Now all you have to do is move the decimal place over by 2, and then you have your total damage resist. I know this method is really janky, and I hope I did a good job explaining it, because I am pretty bad at math and I don't know how to teach. Now I may not be able to teach, but I can at least give you a list of all of the damage resist sources in the game that I could find. I sorted them into different sections to make it a bit easier to digest, since there are a lot of them. Firstly, let's go over the buff called resist. So when you get resistance from some sources, it can appear on your buff bar as the buff resist. The values for these stacks are different in PvP and PvE. In PvE, the resist buff gives you between 10% and 75% damage resistance. It should be noted that the only source of resist times 5 I could find in the entire game was a specific interaction between two omnioculuses. Omnioculi? We'll go over that one later. In PvP, the resist buff gives you between 10% and 43.75% DR. Again, that 43.75% number is only the Omni interaction. As of last week's TWAB, Bungie announced that they were nerfing the PvP damage resist of Omnioculus and Whisper of Chains. These changes are happening next season, and the resist from these two sources specifically are only going to give 2.5% damage resist per stack. Bungie only gave us resist 1 through 4 numbers. However, given that it's a linear plus 2.5%, I'd assume resist times 5 would be 12.5%? So those are the values of the resist buff. However, there is one more thing to note. Sometimes the resist buff just lies to you. An example of this is Whisper of Chains, which gives 40% damage resist in PvE, but it's listed as just resist on your bar. I love inconsistency. Okay, so on to the damage resist sources. Resilience gives you up to 40% damage resist at tier 10. However, it's only against combatants, meaning environmental damage is still the same. Incendiar backpacks and Hydras exploding on death are two examples of enemies dealing environmental damage. If you were ever wondering why, even at tier 10 resilience, you were getting one-shot by the backpacks in the duality dungeon, that's why. In terms of subclass perks, Arcstrider's lightning reflexes will give you 70% damage resist in PvE and 32% damage resist in PvP. This only occurs during your dodge animation. However, by the time this video is out, Season 18 will be right around the corner, so I imagine Arc 3.0 is going to change this. Make sure to look in the description for a pinned comment of the changelog. As mentioned before, Whisper of Chains gives you 40% damage resist in PvE and 15% damage resist in PvP. It also gives you plus 10 recovery. Although again, in Season 18, it is getting nerfed in PvP. Void Overshield gives you 25% damage resist in PvE. Both Titan Barricade and Warlock Rift will give you a 20% damage resist while you're in the animation for placing them. Okay, so this is the part I imagine a lot of people are going to be looking for. So here's all of the super damage resists in the game. So all supers have set damage resistance values. However, supers also get an extra 60% damage resist in PvE. This counts as a separate source of damage resist that's multiplicative with all other sources. This means that it's multiplicative with whatever super you're using's current DR. So let's start off with Hunters. Golden Gun has 0% base damage resist and 15% with the knock 'em down aspect. However, this 15% damage resist only applies to the Marksman Golden Gun. It should be noted though, that even though it has a base DR of 0, in PvE it's at least 60% because of the previously mentioned extra DR in PvE. Spectral Blades have 47% damage resist while you're uncloaked and 48.4% damage resist while you are cloaked. The way how this damage resist works is a bit strange. Basically it has 47% damage resist, and when you're cloaked you get an extra multiplicative 3% damage resist. But again, multiplying the 47% and the 3% does give you that 48.4% number. Blade Barrage has 49% damage resist while you're in the animation. Silence and Squall has 52% damage resist in its animation. Both Arc Staff and Shadow Shot have 53% damage resist. When I say Shadow Shot, I mean both types of tethers. For Titans, Glacial Quake has 47% damage resist. Hammer of Soul has 51% damage resist. And then Burning Maw, Fists of Havoc, Thunder Crash, and Sentinel Shield all have 53% damage resist. For Warlocks, Chaos Reach has 20% damage resist. Nova Bomb has 49% in animation. Well of Radiance gives 49% damage resist in the casting animation. It also gives you a 40 to 50% damage resist in PvP. The 40% is for primary weapons and the 50% is for everything else. Nova Warp, Dawnblade, and Shadebinder all have 51% damage resist. Finally, Storm Trance has 53% damage resist. Before I talk about mods, I want to clarify that none of the damage resist from any of the armor mods in the game apply in PvP. So firstly, there's the basic resist mods. These mods will give you 15% damage resist to a specific type for one mod, and 25% if you have two of the same mod. Multiple mods can apply to the same attack. For example, if an enemy combatant deals void AoE damage to you, both void resist and concussive dampener would apply, resisting the damage by 27.8%. This is because it's 15% damage resist times the other 15% damage resist. Here's a list of all the basic resist mods in the game. These mods can only be equipped on chest pieces. Concussive dampener resists AoE damage, so that's explosives. Melee resist reduces damage from under 4 meters, so this is basically only melees. However, if an enemy shoves their gun in your face, it resists that too. Sniper resist reduces the damage from combatants that are at longer than 29 meters. Then there's Arc, Solar, Stasis, and Void resist. These all resist the different elemental damage types. There are also seasonal mods that are just two different elemental resist mods in a trench coat. And again, no, you can't try and stack them on Artifice armor for 3 times resist. So in terms of the rest of the mods, Protective Light gives you 10% damage resistance upon reaching critical health. Striking Light gives you 25% damage resist while you're sprinting. Well of Tenacity gives you 40% damage resist when you pick up a Void Well, even though the patch notes for it say it's 50%. This is because Bungie does a little bit of trolling. The Dreambane mod gives you 5% damage resist per stack against nightmare bosses up to 25%. However, this only works in nightmare hunts, so no, doesn't work in duality unfortunately. Taken Barrier gives you 20% damage resist to taken enemies, however it only works in the Last Wish raid. I know I mentioned it before, but Heir Apparent's shield has a 45% damage resist against kinetic damage, 20% resist against non-arc elemental damage, and no damage resist against arc damage. And the Catalyst grants it that flat multiplicative damage resist, 75% in PvE and 25% in PvP. Ruinous Effigy gives you 80% damage resist in all activities while blocking with the Transmutation Sphere. Risk Runner gives you 50% damage resistance to arc damage in all activities, but you have to get hit by arc first for it to kick in. Hunters have 2 damage resist exotics. Omnioculus will give you 50% damage resist in PvE and 25% damage resist in PvP if you go invisible. It should be noted that 25% in PvP is getting lowered to 10%. Earlier I mentioned a specific Omni interaction to give you ×5 resist. Basically, if you're wearing Omnis and another Omni Hunter invises you, it will give you resist ×5. Renewal Grasp gives you 25% DR in PvE and 15% DR in PvP while standing inside of a Dustfield Grenade. It also reduces enemy damage output by 50% in PvE and 20% in PvP. Titans have 3 damage resist exotics. ACD 0 feedback fences reduce melee damage by 33%, 55%, and 70% depending on how many stacks you have. This applies in both PvP and PvE. Icefoam Mantle's shield has 62.5% damage resist. Strongholds make all swords block at 90% damage resist. Strangely enough, Warlocks have the most damage resist exotics at 4. Controverse Hold will give you 20% damage resist while charging Void Grenades. Wings of Sacred Dawn gives you 15% damage resist while ADSing and airborne. The Stag gives you 25% damage resist in PvE and 15% in PvP while you're standing in a rift. And finally, Skull of Dire Hamkara gives you 99.5% damage resist while casting Nova Bomb. It basically just makes you invincible. Alright, in terms of the miscellaneous damage resist, we have the perk Land Tank, which gives you plus 10 resilience and 5% damage per stack. This goes up to plus 30 resilience and plus 15% damage resist. Blocking with swords gives between 50% and 80% damage resist based on your guard resistance stat. Blocking with glaives gives you 75% damage resist in PvP and 97.5% DR in PvE. Getting frozen in PvP makes you take 5% more damage from special weapons, heavy weapons, and light-based abilities, but you get 5% damage resist against primaries. So yeah, there's a lot of different sources of damage resist in Destiny 2. I'm sure I missed a few sources given that there's so many in the game, so please leave a comment if there's something that I missed. I know the main one that I haven't talked about is power level. The short version is, at 20 under the recommended power level of an activity, you take about double damage. However, if you're 20 power over, you have about 25% damage resist. These sources stack multiplicatively with everything else, like everything else. So to briefly touch on it, there are some effects in the game which actually reduce enemy damage output. In a weird way, this is an indirect form of damage resistance. So the sources of damage reduction are as follows. Renewal Grasp, which as I mentioned earlier, reduces enemy damage output by 50% in PvE and 20% in PvP. The Psychohack Origin trait, which reduces your opponent's damage by 10%, this applies in PvE and PvP. Warmind's Protection reduces damage dealt to Guardians with the mod equipped by 50% from enemies that are within 10 meters of a Warmind cell. With Global Reach this goes up to 20 meters. Overloading an enemy in PvE reduces their damage by 25%. Because damage resistance allows you to take more damage, it's almost like having a bigger health bar in terms of survivability. This concept is called EHP. EHP stands for effective hit points, or sometimes effective health points. It's essentially how much damage you can take when factoring health, shields, overshields, and damage resistance. To calculate your EHP, divide your health by your total DR multiplier. Here's an example of calculating EHP. Tier 10 Resilience gives you 200 HP and 40% damage resist. So we have our total HP, but we don't have our total DR multiplier. In this case, we only have the 40% DR, so it should be really easy to calculate. Simply take 100% and then subtract the 40%. This will give you 60%. Convert that 60% to a whole number by moving the decimal place over by 2. This is your total DR multiplier. In this case, it's 0.6. Divide 200 by the 0.6 and you get about 333.33, repeating of course, health. This means that 200 HP and 40% damage resist is roughly equivalent to having just 333 HP. In other words, EHP is just semantics. And that's pretty much all there is to EHP. Alright, real quick, it's future Elbone here. I just wanted to point out, Bungie put out a bunch of stuff for Arc 3.0. I have seen this stuff, and there's no numbers on it yet, so I can't put it in the video. I just wanted to say, yes, I did see this, and I am going to put the changes in the comments below. The same applies to my mobility video. So that concludes my guide on resilience and damage resistance. Hopefully I've provided you with useful information. If you enjoyed the guide, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and maybe even hitting the notification bell. I put an obscene amount of time into these videos, so it would be very much appreciated. Unfortunately, I never got around to testing flinch, however it does stack multiplicatively like damage resist, and plus it scales off stability, and it's kind of a weapon stat when you think about it. In the future I'll try and cover flinch if there's enough demand for it. The next video in this series is most likely going to be on recovery, however it might take a little bit longer to come out. Until then, I'm still going to be doing weekly uploads of other Destiny 2 stuff. As I said in my last video, depending on how well this video does, or at least how much community interaction it gets, I might set up a Discord server for people to join if they're interested in getting a sneak peek at upcoming content. Leave a comment below letting me know if you'd be interested in that sort of thing. As I mentioned before, I also have a guide on mobility in addition to this one. Generally, the other videos I upload are funny moments between me and my friends. A lot of people seem to get a kick out of it, so go check it out. Alright, that's all. Thanks so much for watching. You know how in the outro, there's always a meme? This meme has to be the dude walking out. Wait, what? He's moving around like a console player with no sensitivity.